when all was said and done, I was in college and I kept putting off the trauma. I kept saying, not yet, until finally it was not yet. I have kids. And how could I possibly take time away from these beautiful souls to work on myself, right? Well, skip forward to I owned a shop, a boutique in my hometown, and I had to close it and go into bankruptcy. It was very, very difficult, and my brain broke at that point. It just said, right now is when you need to work on this trauma. You need to work on it and get through it. And, it even said to me, if not for you, for your children.
Hello, Jen. Welcome to the Brave Bitches podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. Really excited to dive into you and a little bit of your story today. So thanks for being here.
I'm so glad to be here, Hannah. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yes, it is. We already have such a good vibe, and so I have been excited. I was fortunate enough to be in your podcast, and we had such a great conversation. And so I feel like you got to know me, and I'm excited that you were willing to be on my podcast as well, so I can dive into you a little bit more. And I just feel like this is such a great exchange between the two of us. So I'm excited. But as we dive in, a really good little intro question to help me get to know you a little bit, let the listeners get to know you, is what is one thing that makes, when do you feel most beautiful?
Ooh. That's a great question. Mm-hmm. I think I feel most beautiful when I'm enjoying a really nice moment with my sons.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. The other day, my oldest and I went to a David Lynch film. We went to an art house in Cambridge, Mass, and he was on the board. Eraserhead was premiered there back in the 70s. So it was really fun to see Twin Peaks Fire Walk with me in 35 millimeter. It was great. And I felt amazing. Yeah, I felt absolutely amazing with my son there.
Yeah, I love that. I love this question too, because I find that a commonality between a lot of the answers is when we're connecting with others. There's something about that feeling of intimacy, connection, or just enjoying a moment together that I think kind of bleeds into who you are, how you feel about yourself, and how you feel in that moment. And I feel like that's so special. So, and I could see how that would be even more special to do that with your sons as well. Absolutely. I love that. So cool. Okay, well, we got to know a little piece of you. I would love to hear more about you. I know, Jen, that you are the creator of the coolest stuffed creature in the entire world, the Moody Monster. And so I know we talked about this in our conversation before a little bit about your journey into creating that. So I would love to hear pieces of your story. Maybe tell me a little bit about the Moody Monster, but then tell me kind of how you even got started in that, why you feel that it was something that you had to create or wanted to create.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it. So to give background, I'm a single mom. I live with complex PTSD and major depressive disorder from childhood abuse. And when my brother, so I lived with my brothers, my mother, and my abuser. And when I was 14, one of my brothers told a trusted adult about the things that were happening in our home, and my abuser was taken from the home. And I think a lot of people think that once an abuser is gone, that the trauma is over for kids. And it's not necessarily the truth. We ended up having to go through the court system to put him in prison. And they were not, they weren't sensitive to, abused children. And after all was said and done, I had gone through having to go in front of a grand jury to talk about explicit, things that had happened to me when I was a kid. And when all was said and done, I was in college and I kept putting off the trauma. I kept saying, not yet. I'm in college. I'm trying to have a, quote, normal life, right? Mm-hmm. And then, I just kept pushing it. I'd say, not yet. I'm getting into my career now. and not yet. Oh, I'm getting married. Until finally it was not yet, I have kids. And how could I possibly take time away from these beautiful souls to work on myself, right? I am a consummate caregiver from when I was a little girl. So that was the role that I always just took on, right? So we'll skip forward to I owned a shop, a boutique in my hometown, and I had to close it and go into bankruptcy. And I felt like I lost identity, honestly. It was very, very difficult. And my brain broke at that point. It just said, right now is when you need to work on this trauma. You need to work on it and get through it. And, it even said to me, if not for you, for your children. Which, part of me knew that I may not do this unless I had a reason for others. Yeah. So, I got my team together. I started with my individual therapist, and I also knew that I needed to go inpatient. I needed to work through medications and to just get my head on straight, honestly. And I don't look at that as a weakness. I think a lot of people feel that going inpatient is, taboo. But I knew that that was the appropriate place for me to be able to work through just the starters to get me on a path.
Totally.
So it was there that I was in a group therapy, and I said, I wish I had a monster that I could just rip apart and throw across the room and, burn or whatever I wanted to do to it. and people in the group were like, yeah, you should have that. I was like, okay. And I went home after being inpatient, and I wasn't a seamstress. I'm not a tailor in any way, but I put together this ragtag plush monster, and I made their head and arms and legs of Velcro so that I could rip them apart and throw them and beat them against things and get out that frustration that I had with my symptoms, with that complex PTSD, with that anxiety that was just stirring inside me.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. I feel like I can connect with that. I think a lot of us can, that feeling of when something is so overwhelming in the body, it's like you can move your body all you want, but that physical feeling of like tearing, of releasing that on something else. And I love that you found the little monster that was meant for that, right? Like a healthy way to be like, let me just destroy this thing and wreck it and let out all this frustration, because so many of us just hold it in or don't really have a space where that feels good to come out. And I also kind of want to, before we dive more into that, like, I loved what you said about going inpatient and knowing that that was what you needed. I think that you're right. It is so taboo sometimes to be like, okay, well, that person really has issues. And like, if I don't go in, then I'm saying that I'm not as, I'm not struggling as much type of thing. And there's like this admittance to that. And yet what I feel like is, if you read in stories, so many of like the characters have big changes when they're taken out of their life, when they're taken and done something that is more drastic, that is bigger, that takes them out of their world. And I feel like that's exactly what inpatient is. It gives you this opportunity to step outside of your day-to-day and just focus on yourself and your healing. And I think that's powerful. And I think more of us could humble ourselves and realize what a gift that we even have access to that, right? Because not that long ago, that didn't even exist. And so, yeah, anyways, I just wanted to acknowledge that and point that out as the way that you celebrate that as being a gift to you.
Yeah. I think people, when they see people go inpatient, they say, well, that person's crazy. And it's, I actually went to the hospital where Girl Interrupted is.
Really?
Yeah, the actual hospital. It's McLean Hospital in Massachusetts, and I'm so lucky to be in a place where there is such a incredible mental health facility. So it was important for me to take that step because I knew that I needed to be taken out of my everyday life, or I would just continue down the road of the caretaker, the people pleaser. I needed to make that decision to focus on myself.
Yeah. Where you had no other option but just to care for yourself. You couldn't, put it to the side and say, okay, well, I'm going to be a mom real quick right now, or I'm going to do this. And because that's what I think a lot of us that are caretaker types, like I would say that I'm a caretaker type as well, someone who really loves to serve and love on my friends, my family, and like really show up in that way. But also it can be an unhealthy coping mechanism for me where I feel that when I'm really struggling with my own self, I find that I try to go and fix and help and do everything I can for everyone else outside of me. Like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And it's like, all it is me just trying to avoid what I need to face. And it ends up not being actually a healthy way. It's not really coming from this loving place. It comes from an avoidance, a fear almost of my own inner self.
Absolutely. I think it's that sitting with your emotions, sitting with the pain that you may be feeling about a memory or just an overall generalized feeling, it's really hard. It's so hard to sit in that moment, but it's important to as well. And on my YouTube channel, I do a lot of work with emotions. I have these Moody talks. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is that you have to sit with your emotions and so that you can better understand them and that you can build coping skills for it.
Yeah.
If we avoid the pain, if we avoid the sadness, the anger, those kind of things, we're not giving ourselves, the attention that we deserve.
Ooh, that's a good way to say that. Of like, it's like a wounded patient, right? Where like you could just fix a couple wounds on the top or put a Band-Aid on it. But like if you're not actually solving the problem and dealing with the major wounds underneath, like you're not giving that patient the full attention that they need and that they deserve. And we are the same way. It's just more invisible struggles that we don't see. And I think for me, like emotions have been something that, like for me, I really struggle with facing sadness and pain. So a lot of my life, that was a major avoidance of that. Like I could express myself with joy. I could express anger, actually. But when it came to admitting that I was really saddened by something or hurt by something or admitting the pain that I felt inside, like that's always been an emotion that I have to still consciously be like, okay, we need to acknowledge this. We need to see this. And I need to like put a magnifying glass on it for a bit and really study it and let me face it. I'm curious for you, what do you feel like, were there any emotions that you had a harder time embracing or giving its moment to?
Yeah, so this goes back to the kind of the childhood trauma part of things because my abuser reveled in fear. When we were in fear, if we were showing fear, he enjoyed that. So we had to learn to jump to another emotion so we could hide it. And so for me, whenever I feel fear, I automatically jump to anger. And this is it's a trauma response. It's called secondary emotions. So you have this primary emotion is the proper emotion to be feeling in that moment. But because of that trauma response, I'm jumping to anger, which is not necessarily the appropriate emotion for that situation, right? And we were never told how to show our emotions. For me, it was always push them down. Don't be an angry girl. Don't make Nana upset with your sadness. these type of things that we've been told and we've been conditioned to, you know, to just repeat. And so it takes a lot. One of my favorite coping skills is checking the facts, because it's all about the secondary emotions. If you take all of the emotions out of the situation and look back at it, you can figure out what the appropriate emotion was and what the emotion you probably are feeling. So it's one of my favorite coping skills that I have in my toolbox.
Wow, that's powerful. I would love to hear an example of how you've used that.
Yes. So the example I give a lot for it is, let's say that you're driving on the highway and someone cuts you off really quickly. And it scares you and you have to hit the brakes and you're really, really afraid that you could get into an accident. And then it immediately turns to anger at that person. They cut me off. I'm so
Yeah.
right, exactly. I can't fucking believe that guy just cut me off. And that's where road rage comes in, right? For people, where originally you were afraid you were going to get into an accident. That was the emotion that was appropriate for that situation. But for many people in a situation like that, then they immediately jump to the anger and they're upset with the person that cut them off. I mean, rightfully so, obviously. But that original feeling that you felt was fear.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think, for me, I think that was huge too. Is I feel like my avoidance of sadness and pain was manifested in anger. And so when I would feel sad, it felt vulnerable to me, because I don't want people to see me sad. I don't want them to see me, having a moment of weakness. And so then I would immediately get defensive, angry, this kind of thing. And so I would instigate arguments and I still, honestly, I'm talking about this in the past, but I'm still working through myself,
And we all are. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And so that's something I noticed, a tendency. I think I've never really thought of it in that direct terms. And so I love that you said that, because I think a lot of times if I do go back and look at the facts, I'm like, oh, actually, it was just little Hannah there that felt really sad, or she felt really hurt by that. And instead of saying, I feel hurt and being vulnerable, instead the walls went up and the anger came out. And I feel like something about that makes me feel more powerful, or makes me feel more in control, which is just a bunch of lies, right? It's all the little tricks of the mind to pretend like you're in control. But emotions are funny that way.
You're absolutely right, though. Fear is, you're not safe in fear. Right? You're not safe in that, so that you jump to something that you feel safe in. And that's anger, because you feel like you have more control of anger, even though many of us don't. We just don't realize it.
100%. I don't have control of anger. That's the thing about emotions too, is the more we try to control them, I think the less control we actually have of them. The more they start to move you without you even realizing it.
And that's the reason to sit with it. Right?
Yeah.
Sit with it, because also this too shall pass. Your emotions pass. You don't feel that emotion forever. So understanding that if you sit with it and you collect information about it, it's going to pass. It's going to fade. And then you can look at the situation and understand how it came about, and how next time you will be able to have a skill to help you through it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, emotions are such a core piece of being human, I think. That it's funny that we're not taught how to handle emotions, or we're taught to suppress them so much, and yet really, essentially, that's kind of what makes us human. That's what connects us with each other. That's what connects us with our own desires or fears, or all of what's, the things inside of us. And it's interesting. Yeah, for sure. I want to go back into when you created the Moody Monster. So you first sewed that for yourself.
Yes.
But what was the journey from there when you decided that maybe this could be something you could share outside of yourself?
Yeah, so the very first monster I created, I named him PTSD Pete.
Pete,
So
that's a
Pete and
great
I,
name.
yeah, Pete and I, we got along really well, and I was using Pete and realizing that, if Pete can help me get through these big, big feelings and through the moments that I just felt like I didn't have the control over myself, that they could definitely help others, especially kids. And, looking back at my son, my oldest son had a lot of behavioral issues when he was young. And we used to call him the Tasmanian devil because when he got going, it was a tornado. And, I wished that I had had something that would have helped him through that because children tend to have their, blow ups and then they go into a shame spiral after. And
Yes.
yeah. And you know what? That's just it's not fair for kids to have that because if you have too many of those shame spirals, it becomes toxic. And the toxic shame is not the appropriate emotion. So shame is a valid emotion. But when it becomes toxic, you start to believe that you're a bad person, not what happened, the situation you were in, and the choice you made was inappropriate. You start to believe you're a bad person in the end. And that's the whole of shame, especially for people who have been in trauma. The toxic shame that comes with your body and your emotions can be very overwhelming.
Yeah, it shifts your core beliefs about yourself and this, because instead of saying I did a bad thing, it's I'm a bad person. And yeah, shame is a tricky emotion. I think it's interesting that you said it's a valid emotion because I think my perception of shame has always had a very negative connotation that maybe it's not a useful emotion, but I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So shame is you feel shame when you've gone against a society that you live with, their values and morals. Okay. So let's say that a child is playing at the playground with a couple other kids and they go over and they grab a toy from another child and just run away with it. An adult would go over and say, we don't take people's toys. We don't take kids' toys. We ask for them first. Or we just don't take things from people. And that child feels a twinge of shame. They have learned the lesson that in this society, you don't take things away from others. So that's valid. It's
Yeah.
something that kids learn and they understand. But again, toxic shame is what causes children to feel like they're bad kids.
Yeah.
And so shame can get out of control pretty quickly.
Yeah, what do you think is the difference between guilt and shame?
So
Because,
guilt.
yeah, okay, go.
Yeah, no. So I base this all on DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy.
Okay.
And this is what I learned when I was in hospital, and I still work through to this day. And so guilt in DBT terms is when you go against your own values and morals, whereas shame is when you go against a society's values or morals. So,
Okay.
yeah, and guilt can be toxic as well.
Yeah. So the feeling, I'm sure it feels pretty similar in the body, in the mind.
Yes.
It's just the source of why you're feeling that is a little bit different.
Yes.
Guilt is
So
like,
guilt,
I'm not in alignment with myself. I'm not in alignment with who I want to be. And shame is like, I'm not in alignment with my community and my society, the people around me.
yeah, that's it.
Okay.
We've got it.
Interesting. That's such an interesting perspective on it. I've never heard it expressed that way because the way that I've experienced shame is growing up religious, right? Like it's such a common emotion that I experienced was this feeling of never doing enough and I'm not good enough and I'm a bad person. And if only I did this, that maybe I could be more worthy, right? And like all of these things. And so in my healing journey, it was like separating myself from shame and So then I started to say, okay, well, I mean, obviously I still experience feelings of like I made a mistake, I did something that was not right. And so I would call that guilt. I'd be like, okay, well, that's not this strong feeling that tells me I'm a horrible person. It's just a feeling of I want to do better, I want to do different. But I really like your description because I think it makes a lot of sense. Like so much of the shame I experienced was based on my community and the belief system of who I was around. And I wasn't in alignment with that or didn't feel like I was. And so that's where all those like icky, feelings came in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I know we'd spoken on it that, you started to feel ashamed of your body as you were
Mm-hmm.
changing, right? That's shame that was put on to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not guilt. You're not upset, that you've not followed your own values or morals. That's shame because the society you are in is putting that on you.
Yeah.
And that's when it turns
Totally.
toxic.
Yeah, but I could see how what you were saying that they're in doses. It's a valid emotion that is important, right? Especially like, sometimes that is what creates a child to be like, "Oh, actually, I want to share. I want to be accepted by my peers and, be able to play toys with them. And so I want to learn how to share." And maybe that little piece of shame is what helped them to see that that was the right choice. And yeah, I love this because it's like I already feel like I'm having this idea of, this acceptance of emotions. But there's always more that I realize I maybe didn't have acceptance for shame and how there actually is a place for it. And it doesn't have to be this, thing to be shunned.
Well, yeah, and shame can build empathy.
Mm,
If we go back to the playground, the child who took the toy then sees how it affected the other child that they took it
mm,
from. So it
totally.
builds empathy.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. That's great. And I also think that shame, kind of what we were talking about earlier, shame also is one of those emotions that can be covered by anger or covered by another emotion quite often, where you don't even realize it's shame you're feeling. That's an easy one to slap something else on in front of it and pretend like it doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay, back to the Moody Monster. You created this Moody Monster now, and I love it because we talked about it. You said you could rip it apart. Like it has these Velcro pieces, right? You can even rip the head off, correct?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
head, the arms, the legs. Oh, do you have it? Okay, good. I was gonna
Yep.
ask if you could show it. Ah,
This
it's
is
so cute.
Moody.
I love it so much.
So yeah, you can rip off its head. You can take off the arms and legs. And the best part about it, so at first I thought that the best thing about Moody was ripping them apart.
Hmm.
But the best part about it is putting them back together again.
Mm,
Putting
hmm.
back because it's a part of you. You let out that emotion, you let out that frustration, and now putting Moody back together again, you can really think on, what happened there, and it's a perfect time for parents and caregivers to talk to kids, to communicate with them about emotions, because they're like,
Yeah.
you used Moody safely to get out those big feelings that you're having. Now, let's put them back together again. Let's talk about what happened. What can we do next time to better cope with these big feelings you're having?
Hmm. Is there like an age range that you feel like works for Moody
I say zero
best?
to 100
Love it.
because,
Yes.
they are a buddy. They're a transition tool for children. They're safe. They don't have any weird parts or anything like that.
Hmm.
And I have many friends and many adults who have Moody and they use them all the time for themselves.
Hmm. I love that. Okay, so what do you feel like is a good conversation, especially maybe for if we're talking about like parents to their kids, they're introducing Moody. What's the best way to introduce emotions and using Moody and all that stuff?
Yeah, well, part of me building Moody was that I also created a coloring book that talks
Mm,
about Moody and big feelings and how Moody is there as this tool. It doesn't hurt them to rip them apart. It doesn't hurt them at all. And that's why you use them because they're safe to
yeah.
use. They're always going to be your buddy whether you rip them apart or not. They're never going to hold it against you, right? And it gives parents a chance to also see that their children are in need. If they're pulling Moody apart, it means that your child needs to be, given attention and listened to. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of us as parents, we tend to jump over that and just give them, like what you want them to hear about what they've done. When Moody gives parents a chance to ask a child what happened
Yeah.
rather than just yelling at them, saying, "Oh, I see that you ripped Moody apart. What can we do to help you in this moment? Because you're obviously upset about something."
Yeah, that's powerful. I love that, a signal of seeing kind of inner turmoil in a child, because they have something to express it that is so tied and associated with those emotions. Instead of, like, say you see your kid go kick over their sibling's toy, you're going to be like, "Hey, don't kick over their toy." But, like, maybe in that moment they're regulating themselves. They're mad about something else or sad about something else, and so they're letting it out that way. But Moody feels like this clear signal of, like, okay, I'm ripping Moody apart, and the parents can hopefully have a gentle conversation and be able to show up for their kid, because it's more apparent that there's something going on. That's really cool.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I love it. Okay, I'm curious, do you still use Moody?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Moody is
Yeah,
always with me. Yeah, always with me. Yeah,
I love it.
and they click. It clicks with me because Moody is pretty much a love letter to my healing journey. They kind of kicked it off for me. So
Yeah.
everything that I do to, build a brand or whatever that may be, it's all comes down to my relationship with Moody.
Yeah, because you believe in it, because it works for you. Yeah. It's been a tool that's shown up for you and provided for you so much that I feel like that makes it so much more easy to, like you said, build a brand, promote, do of these, business side things, because you're like, I genuinely believe in this. I
Yeah.
genuinely feel that this can help you, it can help your kids, and all of those things. That's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just been beautiful, I think. Moody has really helped me along with learning to love myself because, again, I feel like Moody's an extension.
Yeah.
So they're a part of me, and I appreciate them for helping me to, bring out the parts of me that need to share, want to share, and who really want to heal. Because there are parts of us that don't want to because they're too afraid to, right?
Yeah.
I work with internal family systems with my therapist, and we talk about little Jen, and we talk about the other parts that are really afraid to heal, because for me, again, it's an identity thing. It's like, who am I if I'm not this person? The person who is hyper vigilant, who is a total caregiver, who is a people pleaser, right? That identity has been a part of me for 50 years. So sometimes there's that fear of, should I heal? Will I be the same person? But Udi has given me that belief in myself
Yeah.
that I can still be me and I can be healthy and feel less hypervigilant, less stressed, less, just the overall people pleaser that I am.
Yeah, I think that that's such a good point of, there is that inner self that feels like, am I going to lose who I am? Especially qualities like people pleasing and caretaking, right? This feels like there's a lot of worth attached to that, at least for me, right? This idea of, if I do that, then I'm worthy type of thing. And so you're like, okay, well, if I step away from that a little bit, or I give myself permission to be someone outside of that, like, am I still going to be worthy? Am I still going to be a person that I like? That am I still going to be Hannah? Am I still going to be Jen? You know?
Right.
Um, yeah, yeah. And so you feel like Moody was kind of a huge part of that with you refiguring out who you are and your identity.
Yeah. And I think that's because it spurred me to become more public and more
Okay.
open about my story.
Mm,
And with that, every day that I share my story, I feel more power because I know that someone out there needed to hear this story. And I'm giving to them. Yeah, I'm a people pleaser. I'm a caregiver. And yet that feels really good for me to be able to share my story, make people not feel so alone in their own lives. And so it's given me a voice.
totally. Interesting because it almost feels like it's not like you replaced the caregiving and people pleasing side, but instead kind of utilized that nature of you or that pattern that you have to let it be something to serve others and to grow outside of this like maybe little box that you had put yourself in. And yeah, that's powerful. And so so much of that came from you getting to share your story, and you wouldn't have really had that platform to do so unless you would have created Moody.
Right?
Yeah. Or like I even love, I bet, even just when you first shared it with your group, you said at the facility where you said, I wish I had a monster to rip open. They were like, you should probably have that. Like I think even in that moment was the same thing that you are doing now, right? It was a piece of you sharing your story, sharing what you needed and being open about that. And like, and so I love how even just that first conversation where you mentioned something probably flippantly, not thinking I'm genuinely going to make this monster to destroy, but even then you that was like the first seed to what you're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. Sharing my story, sharing my emotions. And I think that it's just been very freeing. And we've talked about community because you've created an incredible community. And I think that that is what spurred me on as well, because, yeah, I did talk about this in group therapy. And when I was a kid, I hated group therapy, hated it. Oh my God. All the kids that were there, they're like, fuck this. What the
Yeah.
hell is, what the hell are we sitting here like looking at each other about? But, right? It's
I feel like it's
true.
such a kid thing too, or teen thing too. It's like, why are you making me do this? That's the type of vibe, right? Yeah.
Right. Like, and think about it. If you did watch like Girl Interrupted or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where they're like sitting there in group and they're like, what the hell are we doing here? Right.
Yes.
But when I went inpatient as an adult, it was a completely different experience. It was community. It was a group of people who understood how I felt, had gone through similar situations, and are coming out on a different path from where they started. And just the raw feeling of other people understanding your story is just,
The best.
it's the best. So when you build community like you have, women are realizing they're not alone. There are other women in this world that they can relate to who understand them, and they don't feel alone.
Oh, I know that's the best. I think that like we were talking about the community, it's like connection is what makes you feel beautiful, right? And it's that same thing where that moment when you feel understood, when you're like, oh my gosh, you get it. You feel me. Like that's like what I feel like should be the most important thing that we are seeking out in this world, to connect and to feel that way with others, but also to provide that feeling for others. Like it's that mutual exchange of just saying, I understand you, I hear you, and you're loved right where you're at, is so beautiful. And I think that's why I was so appealed and attracted by Moody, because I think that just the monster itself is already saying there's so much permission. You have so much permission to be all the things you are. And so I think Moody, even just being this like inanimate object, also makes you feel seen and heard in some ways as well.
Well, they're your buddy. You
Yeah.
can have them around whenever you want,
Hmm.
like they're not there to, cast judgment.
Hmm.
They're just there for you. They are
Yeah.
specifically there for you.
Hmm. That's why I love having pets too.
Hmm.
I also just feel like my cat, it's like if I'm crying or something and he's right there and I'm like, he's not judging me. He's like, I'm here, girl. Like, I got you. Cry it out. Or maybe he sits at the end of the bed and looks at me.
Yeah,
But I still,
yes.
but I still
I
feel
get
like,
both.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, but even then, I'm like, your judgment doesn't bother me. Like, even if you are looking at me like, you weirdo, I love pets because I think that there is this acceptance to them and this like love exchange. And I remember as a kid, that was so healing for me to have animals. And then I didn't have animals for so long as an adult. And now I have a cat, and I really do feel like it's so healing as well. Do you have animals? This is a side
I
tangent.
do. No, I
Okay.
have two. No, I have two cats, and
Yep.
I'm surprised they're not running back and forth because they just ate. They're usually behind me, zooming
Yep.
everywhere around this
The
time of night.
best.
Yes, and I have a tiny little black cat. She is insane. I think I call her Psycho all the time. She's like running around. I'm like, what are you doing, Psycho?
Yeah. It's the best though. They're the
It
best.
is. It is
They're so
because at the end of
entertaining.
the they are, and at the end of the day, they love you,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they want to sit and watch TV with you too and cuddle up.
Hmm. Yeah. I know. I feel like having an animal is like one of the greatest gifts. It's like you get to have this little creature. You don't speak the same language. You can't, like you can only communicate so much, and yet like there's this bond that is so special. And yeah, I mean, even my husband and I feel like our relationship got better when we got our cat.
Yeah,
You know?
because you have this little third party that is like,
Yes.
I love you both.
Hmm.
And you guys are fighting right now, and just so you know that I'm here for both of you.
Hmm. Yeah, he's like, I love you both. You're both cool. You both feed me. Like, we're
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
Yeah, like even I heard him just walking by and let out a little meow just to let me know he's here, I think. He's like, hey, just want you to know when you're done with your
Hmm.
podcast, I'm here ready to hang out with you. Um, but yeah, I think I feel like there are so many tools and things that we can use as humans to fully encompass and embrace all that it is to be human. And I truly do feel that having animals is one of those things that I recommend to everyone. I'm like, y'all should have a little fur buddy to love on and let them love on you, because there's nothing quite like that.
Yeah, no, no, there isn't. It's the unconditional love that will, they look right up into your eyes and say, "I love you."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, I'm curious. So we've talked about the Moody Monster is a huge tool for you, and and you becoming your full self and kind of re figuring out your identity and who you are. Your pets are a huge part of that as well, and
Mhm.
therapy. But I'm curious if there's anything else that, if anyone's listening and they're looking for tools or things to help them along in their healing journey. Is there anything else that you feel like is like, yes, try this, do this?
I am a huge proponent of creating a coping skill toolbox for yourself.
Okay,
And
cool.
yeah, I think everybody should have them. And I think that Moody is one of those tools that can help children to build a toolbox as well. But we need to. Adults need to have our own toolbox. And building it takes time, it takes energy, but it really is worth it in the end. And it's
Mm-hmm.
why I share all of my favorite coping skills on my Moody Talks, is so that people can understand that there are more skills out there than just, I don't know, what the general audience knows about, right? The DBT was created for people with PTSD, and I think that their tools are great for general audience, for everyone, because emotions, like going back to what we were talking about before, emotions are hard.
Yeah.
And sitting through them is so difficult. So why not have a few tips and tricks that we can pull out so that, and they don't have to be just like, like emotional ones. You can have physical. A lot of tools are physical, like getting yourself out of the moment when you're distressed. Like distress tolerance is so important, and having the coping skills that come with distress tolerance is really a gift. It's getting yourself out of the intensity of an emotion so that you can step back and give an overall view of it and understand, again, understand why you're in that situation, understand how to work through that, especially when it comes to like interpersonal communication. Like we tend to just jump at each other. But if we can build ourselves a toolbox that helps us to step away from the moment, figure out what we need, because interpersonal effectiveness is the concept of getting what we need out of communication with someone.
Oh, totally.
So having those kind of tools are so important.
Yeah. How does one start creating a coping skill toolbox?
Yeah, let's get into that. I strongly believe that it is based off of experimentation. You've got to try different coping skills in order for you to figure out which ones work best for you. And then it's repetition. You need to, if you find one that has actually worked for you, continue using it. And it's not even continue using it only when something bad happens. Use it outside of those difficult moments so that it becomes rote.
Okay.
And that's where you start, because I have gotten into situations that I've finally been able to say, holy shit, I used my toolbox. That's crazy.
Yeah. And like unintentionally too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you feel
So
that
cool.
pride, right? Oh my God, I actually did it. I pulled out a tool, I used it, and it actually helped the situation for once.
Yes. That's so good.
So finding those coping skills that work well for you. And again, like I said, they can be physical. A lot of distress tolerance is about taking yourself out of your body and out of the intensity of an emotion so that you can come back into it fresh and focused. Okay. So one of my favorites is I have this Crayola model magic, and I learned this in hospital. You take this model magic and you put some essential oils on it, something that you want to smell. Like if you want to be calming, you put some like lavender essential oil in there. You want to be more energetic, you put maybe like orange or, a citrus flavor in there so that you are, mushing it in your hands. You're getting the senses going. You've got the feel, the touch, the feel, and you're bringing all of your senses out so that it can pull you out of that intensity that you're feeling with that emotion.
Oh, interesting. That's so cool. I love the idea. It's like Play-Doh type of feel?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's called Model Magic, and you can get it anywhere. You can get it on Amazon, or you could get it like Michael's or those type of places. And it's just, it stays together. It's really like it pulls so that you can actually pull it. It feels really good. And then you squish it and it takes you out of that intense emotion because your senses are going.
That's huge. That sounds so fun. I also love that too because it brings play, that childlike playfulness in us that we don't really give ourselves permission. In fact, I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, I can't do that. That's going to make me feel funny, or they're going to feel a little awkward when they first try it. And yet that's like, I think that's probably the sign that it's a good one for them to try out, like let yourself play a little bit, feel a little silly for a second, because that pulls you out of whatever, if that's anxiety or whatever thing is weighing on you. That's huge. For me, like dancing is a huge one. I love to dance, especially when I feel any sort of strong emotion. That really helps. I also love to punch my bed. That's another, and so those are a couple of physical ones that I think are my coping skills. But I love, you shared that you have shared about different coping skills on your YouTube channel, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
There's tons of them up there. I've gone through all of the emotions that can feel more intense and difficult. I don't like to call them negative emotions because I don't think any emotions are negative. But the ones that are harder to deal with, the harder to cope ones. So I've gone through each of those, and each one I have given specific coping skills that I've learned through DBT.
So cool.
And DBT, there's so much out there on the internet, very easy to get that information. And they really are some amazing skills to learn. And like I said, Moody has taken me into this place where by sharing these things, I am building my toolbox up because I'm remembering them as I do them.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and I feel like for anyone that's wanting to, not really sure where to start with the coping skills or any of that, I feel like I'll have the link to your YouTube channel below. So please go check that out and just explore all the things. I know I'm going to go there too. I've watched some of your stuff, but I'm going to go in there more. But this conversation has been so enlightening. I have loved to hear more of your heart, and just you are in general is such a light and an example of someone overcoming major difficulty to be this like bright human who just is so infectious. And so I've loved our conversation, but do you mind if I start to wrap it up with our rapid fire questions?
Absolutely. I'm ready for it. Let's do it.
Okay. First question I have for you, and I'm actually really curious about this one for you, is if you could choose a superpower, what one would it be?
Ooh, my goodness. That's a good one. I think that I would like the power to like zap myself to different places.
Like teleportation.
Teleportation. Yeah. I think I'd like that one because sometimes I just don't want to go out into the winter.
Yes.
I want to just be zapped over to, I got to go
no driving in the snow, nothing like that, right?
Right. As long as the things that I'm carrying can come with me too.
Yes, that's a good stipulation. That's awesome. Okay, next question is, what is a go-to comfort meal for you?
Chocolate. Always chocolate.
Chocolate. I love it. I said meal. You said chocolate, girl. I don't need a meal. Just give me the chocolate.
Chocolate is a meal to me.
Okay, what kind of chocolate? I'm curious.
I am a huge dark chocolate fan.
Okay.
I love, do you know the endangered species chocolate?
No.
It's a company. It's Endangered Species, and they have an 88% chocolate, and it's got the panther on it as the endangered species. So
I love it.
That specific 88% dark chocolate, panther, endangered species.
You would love Peru because there is chocolate everywhere and so much dark chocolate, and so I definitely think you would have a good time here. Because I actually haven't been a chocolate lover most of my life. And then I got to Peru and I started having some dark chocolate here. And I was like, maybe I like chocolate. Is this a thing? It's like opening up my world because it's so good here. So if I'm falling into it, you would absolutely love Peru.
I am definitely sure I would love Peru.
Yes, you would. Okay, next question I have for you is, are there 3 books, movies, or podcasts that you can recommend to the listeners?
Do they have to all be the 1-3? Like it has to be 3 podcasts?
You can pick one of each, 2 of one, one of another. Yeah.
Okay, so I am a huge horror fan. My
Okay.
family is a big horror fan. It's so funny. I have friends that have a horror heals podcast, which
Oh,
talks about, and
fun.
I was the second person on the show, but talks about how horror is good for mental health
Wow.
and how it gets people through. And so horror has always been there for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been because of my hypervigilance, I have a superpower.
Mm.
My superpower is that I don't jump scare.
Oh,
I
interesting. Because you're
I
aware.
very, very real. Yeah, because I'm always
Yes.
hyper aware. So that's
Uh-huh.
my superpower. I can go back and say that. That's my superpower.
Getting
So I
out of
don't jump scare.
there.
So
I
I
love
would
it.
say the Horror Heals podcast, if people love horror, and Corey and Kendall just have amazing people on. They have people from horror movies and all that kind of stuff, but just
Cool.
talking about mental health care.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what else? For horror, I'm reading right now. Oh my gosh, can I remember the name of it? It is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls.
Oh,
And I
love the
can't
name.
remember. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the. I'll send you the name of the author and stuff. But I'm reading it. It's about. It's in the 1970s, and it's about these girls who go to a place where they're pregnant, and they
Mm.
have their children there in, not in anonymity,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of the girls get enticed by a witch
Oh,
to,
interesting.
yeah, it's very good. I'm at the very end of it, and I love it. So
Oh,
I
cool.
highly recommend that.
I'm definitely
And
gonna
let's
look into that. I hate horror movies because I do jump scare. I'm the complete
Okay.
opposite of you. I will pee my pants. But I actually love reading horror. I for some reason can get into that and love getting into the world of that, but maybe because it's not jump scaring me. And so,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. No, that's perfect. Let's see, what one more thing that I would recommend. Music in general. Music
Mm.
got me through everything when I was a kid. So I have a Nine Inch Nails tattoo
So cool.
because Nine Inch Nails got me through, and I'm like obsessed. I got my tickets for the concert that's coming up with them.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I would recommend Nine Inch Nails.
There you go. I
If
love it.
you're if you love to get angry and need to get shit out, definitely Nine Inch Nails. Take a
Yeah, my
listen.
niece loves
Just
them. That's so
yeah.
cool. Awesome. Okay, and last question for you
Sure.
is why do you feel it's important to be brave?
It's important to be brave so that you can feel empowered.
Hmm.
Bravery comes not easily, but when you make the decision to be brave, you get that feeling of pride and balance inside of you and commits you to continue being brave because you love the feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Such a good answer. Well, again, thank you, Jen, for being here. This was such a cool conversation, and
Yes.
I can't wait to share it with all my listeners. It's going to be so rad. But so much love to you, and so much love to all the
Yes.
things that you're doing in this world. Moody is such a gift, and so also I will have that link down there. All your recommendations will be down in the show notes as well. So, is there anyone else, anywhere else that people can connect with you, or anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, they can find me at, at Moody's website. Reach out. I would love for people to reach out to me to talk more. I just love sharing, and I'm more than happy to share with others. And if they need a helping hand to get through, please, I highly encourage you to reach out to me, and let's talk.
Awesome. I love it. You're just an open door, ready to connect and share your story. Well, again, thank you so much, Jen, and so much love as you go out into the world.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of the Brave Bitches podcast. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, share, review, all that good stuff. Also follow me on Instagram at Hannah Soul Marie or at Brave Bitches without the I for some behind the scenes look and clips from the episode. Again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.